Hello again, everybody. Oh, lots and lots of screens. That's really nice. Hope you're all well. Hope the fact that the sun is shining, the beautiful autumn colours are out is lifting you after a bit of a grey day tomorrow. Yesterday. I'm quite tired today, can you tell? So, just want to have a little bit of a recap over what's been said the last few weeks. And if you have, a lot of you who are on the screen, I know have been present, but if you have missed weeks, they're all on the YouTube channel. And more than normal, we would encourage you just to go back and have a listen, just because we're trying to underpin everything that's coming with the values that we believe are important. So as you know, we've been talking about sort of coming to the table, and that the Lord has laid out for us a feast that is on offer, and it's a place to encounter Jesus. And each of us are invited, and we're not just invited because we've already signed up. Anybody is invited to this table. And so we've looked at some of the values around that, and what can affect how people come to the table. We've talked about accessibility. Who has access to the table? And we actually spent a week where John was helping us think about what boundaries do we put in the way, sometimes very inadvertently, but what stops people from even thinking that the table is anything relevant for them? We talked about how sometimes we put Jesus in a glass box, like in a museum, or that he's roped off, and you can sort of look from the distance, a bit like the disciples did to the children when Jesus said, "Let the children come and do not hinder." And we talked about how Jesus, like anything in our lives, we need to experience him, his love and his goodness, and what a difference it makes when we can actually experience it, and when that's true for others as well. And we talked about the fact that in 1 John 3, it says that we are all children of God. And so that includes people who don't know him yet. They are made in his image, and they are his children, even if as yet they haven't found their father. We talked another week about spaciousness of heart, and about the concept of radical hospitality, how much that's about the room in our hearts to recognize God's image in every other human being, and how much Jesus crossed boundaries. We talked last week about how inclusive Luke's gospel is as well, and that the invitation to the table is for absolutely everyone. And I can't emphasize that enough. And whether they choose to accept that at this point, at another point in their life, even in the last few moments of life, the invitation is still there. And I think sometimes, I just want to touch on this, sometimes when we think about reaching other people for Jesus, we think about evangelism. Some of us, and I would include myself in this, feel nervous about that. What about if they ask all these questions and I don't have the answers? How do I have to convince them? How do I have to persuade them? How do I have to invite them? And I want to say that what we've learned the last few weeks is that we don't invite them. The invitation comes from Jesus, because we are fellow invitees to the table. We're on the same level, even if we've already accepted him. We are also participants at the table. The invitation is from him. And our job is to journey alongside. And that's quite different than sort of announcing to or trying to convince, but to journey alongside as somebody also invited to the table. And the problem is that if we think that we're doing the inviting, then we tend to think that the table is ours. And then we start choosing who gets to attend. We all do this. And the other thing, if we think that we're inviting, and then that person in this particular season of their life is unresponsive or disinterested or actually quite rude or outrightly reject it, the danger is that we take it as a rejection of us. But that's not right, because it's not us that the invitation is. And when we feel rejected, then it shuts down the relationships on both sides. And that's wrong. As long as there is breath in my body, in your body, and in anybody's body out there, we are welcome to the table. And the timing of how long it might take someone to get there is not for us to determine. And that's really hard, because sometimes when you pray for years and years and you don't see any movement, or you have a conversation and you have a glimmer of hope and you think, yes, you know, now it's all going this way, and then you see them make a decision and turn their back. It's so hard. And actually, a lot of us who've grown up in the church, we've sort of been conditioned that there's this line that we've got to get them over. We've got to tick this box. We've got to, you know, get this done, if you like. But actually, that's the starting line. It's not the finishing line. And I strongly believe that our call as a church is to journey alongside, to meet the Jesus and encounter the Jesus who hosts the table and who does the inviting and who woos people to himself. And so our journey, our responsibility is to build relationships, to listen, to love, to hear the stories in the background, because it changes how we understand who they are and the choices they've made, to pray for them, and also to live authentically. And I've been looking at this a little bit. So this is just the sort of one of the last values that I just want to touch on, just for a little mini section this morning, authenticity. I'm just going to read to you from, not from Luke this week, actually. Can you hold those for me? From Mark chapter 9. This is when a desperate man comes with his son who is very, very ill. Verse 14. And when he came to his disciples, that's Jesus, he saw a great multitude around them and scribes disputing with them. Immediately when they saw him, all people were amazed, and running to him, they greeted him. And he asked the scribes, "What are you discussing with them?" Then one of the crowd answered and said, "Teacher, I brought my son to you who has a mute spirit. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down. He foams at the mouth and he gnashes his teeth and he becomes rigid. And I spoke to your disciples that they should cast it out, but they could not." He answered him and said, "O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? Bring him to me." Then they brought him to him, and when he saw him, immediately the spirit convulsed him, and he fell on the ground and wallowed, foaming at the mouth. So Jesus asked the father, "How long has this been happening to him?" And he said, "From childhood. And often he's thrown him into the fire and into the water to destroy him." This is verse 22. "But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." Jesus said to him, "If you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes." And immediately the father of the child cried out and said with tears, "Lord, I believe, help my unbelief." And when Jesus saw the people come running, he rebuked the unclean spirit and said to it, "Deaf and dumb spirit, I command you to come out of him and enter him no more." Then the spirit cried out, convulsed greatly, and came out of him, and he became as one dead, and many said, "He is dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And then the disciples talked to him about why they couldn't do that, and that's a different sort of part to this. So that was from Mark chapter 9, verse 14 through to about 27. Now, this is such an encouraging story. And one of the reasons it's encouraging is that you have this man, he knows that his son desperately needs help that is beyond him. He has presumably tried to fix this in no end of other ways and medical ways and sought advice. And so he comes to the disciples, and it seems that Jesus isn't with them at that moment. And so he asks them, and then he brings him to Jesus. And in verse 22, it really struck me, these words. He says, "If you can do anything, have compassion and help us." So he's brought him to Jesus, but there's still an if. There's still a bit of a, you're my last chance. Can you do anything? Is there a chance? And then Jesus uses exactly the same words back to him in my version. Verse 23, Jesus says to him, "If you can believe, all things are possible. So the man has said to Jesus, if you can, are you able? If you can. And Jesus has said, if you can, are you able to believe? Because anything is possible. And that man says in tears, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. That is such a beautiful verse for us. And I'll tell you why. Because it shows an authentic, broken man. And I think that we all relate to him. Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. I'm going to put my hand up and say that prayer fits me most days in a lot of areas. You know, on one level, there's such faith and there's such desire for God and passion. And then on another level, I look at the world around, or I look at circumstances, or I look at things that are too hard to understand. And there's that part. And I need to say, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And really the only difference between me and him, that man, is that he had the courage to say it. He said it in front of people. He said it out loud. Did we say that in church? Did we acknowledge this? Or did we just talk about having the faith and pressing through? You see, sometimes the danger is that in church we have a sort of selective or edited or sanitized version of ourselves, don't we? All of us do this, a bit like a filter that you put on your pictures when you put them on your computer, you know. And it, one of the things I find really hard about Zoom is how I look on Zoom. I don't like it, and I don't like how the front page of the YouTube videos come up. But it's very good to keep me humble because it isn't filtered and the wrinkles aren't gone, and it's just who I am, and it's just the real me. And actually, what freedom there is when in a church we can be authentically us and not have to selectively edit parts of ourselves, our temper, our problem habits, our behavior, our background, edit out things in order to stay accepted in a community. Sometimes I think we do that. And we avoid sort of being truly authentic because it seems like the consequences, if people really knew who we were, are just too great. And I told you a story a few weeks back about a church that made a sign outside, for some of you will remember, and the sign originally said, "Come just as you are." Do you remember? And then somebody was very upset about that, said that was inappropriate, and they had to just say, "Come." And you know, the gospel really is come as you are. And yet, if we think about when we're in church, when we're with each other, and I'm looking at this screen and I genuinely love you guys. And I think we have a lot of love between ourselves, don't we? Like we're family together. And yet sometimes, even in those settings, when we come to church, it's not quite true, is it? We don't come completely as we are. And sometimes it's the how are you, I'm fine, on a very superficial level. Sometimes it goes a lot deeper than that, and we're a lot more authentic than that, depending on what's happening. But I believe that this is sometimes why the church loses people, not just our church, the church, because we all have such a deep desire to be fully known, fully seen, and fully known. And really it should be a non-negotiable in church, because if we're not being authentically us as broken people, welcome to the table, accepted and saved by grace, and pursuing that journey in our brokenness and with our failings and our flailings together, then we are distorting the image of Jesus. I found a quote in a book that I was reading, and it said this: "There is nothing at all redemptive about a church made up of selectively authentic people. And there's nothing gained in acceptance of each other that is built on redaction." There's some long words in there. There is nothing redemptive about a church made up of selectively authentic people. And there's nothing gained by acceptance that's built on redaction. So you know when they redact documents and they black out all the bits that they don't want you to know about. Sometimes we do that, don't we? We hide them. But actually we're meant to be a beautiful but broken but really authentic community, Because when we are truly authentic, then we display the full power of what Jesus can do in our beauty and our brokenness. So we mustn't be afraid and just hide that. And I honestly believe, church, that in the last, in these times that we are going through now, these COVID times, when there's so much that we can't do together and plan and organise and arrange, that what he's doing first is a work in us. The radical hospitality, the spaciousness of heart, the looking at our own selves and who we make accessible, who we can invite, who we can journey alongside, laying cutlery on the table, an extra set, just to say to the Lord, which one person would you have me journey alongside and invite them to your table? I believe that he's doing a work in us, and part of that work is also authenticity and not being afraid to be truly who we are in our brokenness, with our messy backgrounds, and saying, look, this is it. This is as good as it gets. And actually, this is some of the mess that was there. But look at the beauty when Jesus takes this and he transforms it. And that is true for each of you. And when people see that, the people outside, they're so hungry. They're so hungry for it, because it's not this neatly packaged, sanitized, sterile version of church. It's honest, authentic, broken, messy people loved by Jesus, and with that love, able to love others. So first of all, I believe right now he's doing a work in us. And then secondly, from that, as a church, looking at all these values, we need to say, what is Buxton Church in the Peak here for? Why are we in Buxton? I don't necessarily mean historically. I mean, right now, we're not that big a town, 25,000 people or something. There's a huge number of mostly very small churches, of which we are one in Buxton. What are we called to be? Do we exist just to be a church that offers a sort of less formal, less traditional, freer worship version of going to church? Is that our purpose? Because I don't believe that is. That might happen to be the style that we worship in, but I don't think that's what we're called to be. What are we uniquely positioned for? And actually we are positioned differently, because we don't, for example, have, we have got the source building, but we don't have the upkeep of a huge traditional church building that is set aside for certain activities. We are freer in some ways to reach out and to journey alongside. I believe we're uniquely called to bring hope, to be a church of hope bringers. I believe we're called to see the kingdom in the community as we journey alongside, and to cross that divide between, oh, church is over here, and then all the things that happen in town is over here. So there's a, do you want to say what there? Do you want to come in now?
Hello, I'm still here. So what is this? We've talked about all these values: the accessibility, inclusivity, the spaciousness of our hearts, and the being real, the authenticity. When Joe was saying that, I wanted to, you know how you can put your hand up on Zoom. I wanted to sort of actually just say, okay, who struggles with, maybe anger or bitterness, or who struggles with depression or their mental health, or who struggles with, I don't know, what they look at on the internet, or I don't know. There can be so many different things, and we've got to be people who actually put our hands up and say, yes, I do. That is a real struggle for me, because if we're not being real, then I don't know. It just seems like we're not going to be attractive to anybody outside if we're just pretending. But so we've been through these values, and what we think our church needs to be really in the business of doing, what it really needs to be focusing on to demonstrate that there is an invitation for everybody to this table, is creating accessible spaces for people to encounter Jesus. Accessible spaces for people to encounter Jesus. Now that is quite different in a post-COVID world, or pre-COVID, if we were looking backwards, to what it might look like now. But you know, what does that say to you when you think, you know, what is an accessible space? We've talked about how we have sometimes inadvertently put barriers in the way of people being able to access. You know, sometimes physical, just sometimes they're barriers just in the way we speak, or in our demeanor, just who we are. And so if we're talking about making something accessible, spaces accessible, what does that actually look like? And I think we need to think much bigger and wider than traditional Sunday church, because I think that's just such, it's the tip of the iceberg of what church is supposed to be about. When we talk about bringing the kingdom into Buxton, into the surrounding villages, to include Mike and Caroline, and anyone else who might happen to be out there.
Graham's away.
Yeah, the Grahams, yeah. Yeah, and Paula and Martin, yeah. So it's not just about Buxton, but, you know, what does it look like to bring the kingdom? And I think the kingdom is so much wider than we give it credit for, really. And that actually, when we see the kingdom come, it can be displayed in so many different ways. So I think some of these spaces that actually just can introduce people to Jesus they will look completely different to church. They're nothing like church. It's just that they've got us in them, and we are supposed to be little mini Jesuses, really, just sort of displaying his heart for people, his authenticity with people. And so it might be that, you know, I'm just thinking of some of the ideas that I've heard suggested over the years of what we might get involved with. One of them is sort of like a before school club for kids, a breakfast club, and just having somewhere that kids can come and get some food, which is a very practical need that is there and is real, and very real at the moment, very real in the news. And a need that we can see Jesus was concerned about as well, and he was feeding people, but that it also then brings them into contact with us, and that gives us an opportunity not to get out there and say, oh, do you know Jesus? You know, have you said the sinner's prayer and all that sort of stuff? Just to actually start walking alongside, befriending people, and helping them to access Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
No, but you carry on anyway.
So when that is a little bit of a strap line, accessible spaces where people can encounter Jesus. And I want to say that it is about encountering Jesus and not encountering church. And sometimes when people encounter church, that puts them an obstacle in the way to them actually encountering Jesus. And sometimes when they encounter church, they feel that they have to learn to behave in a certain way, or they have to modify their behavior. But we're talking about people being led to a place where they can encounter Jesus, because encountering church is not life-changing, but encountering Jesus is. So, you know, if we were in non-COVID times, we might start planning all sorts of events that we could do around this. but we can't at the moment. And I wonder whether that's a gift to us as church, much as we're all struggling with all of this COVID business, but maybe it's a gift that we can't do lots of things and arrange lots of things and make lots of stuff happen right now, because maybe the Lord needs to teach us how to live it out in ones and twos again. It's a long time since we've done that. You know, who can I journey alongside? How can I develop the relationship with my next door neighbour or with my local shopkeeper that I see all the time? How can I be intentional about helping that one person encounter Jesus, encounter him through me, encounter him through developing the relationship, and not just sort of accepting, oh, well, it's my next door neighbour and we talk about this, but after that we don't go any further and we keep ourselves to ourselves. And I think the Lord really needs to take us back to how the early church operated, in twos and in threes. I saw something this week, and I'll throw it out in case you want to do it. It was talking, there was a page called Positive Pumpkins, and it was talking about redeeming Halloween, and people are carving the word hope into pumpkins and maybe putting a Bible verse like the light has overcome the darkness and the darkness will never, I've got that the wrong way, you know what I'm saying, from 1 John. And
you heard it here first.
Yeah. And so they were redeeming something that people, you know, look forward to, particularly in Buxton. They love Halloween. And they came up with this idea of treat the street. Now, some of you live on huge streets, but it could just be a little thing. And they were saying, why don't you, just as part of a way of showing light and love and hope, why don't you, you know, take a little card or a little chocolate bar, or it could be anything very, very simple, just to a few of your neighbours, and put a little card through with a positive message that we all need hope and light in these times, and maybe a little Bible verse on the bottom that just said, just treat and bless your street. And I thought, what a simple idea of journey alongside, of starting the process of those relationships, of people knowing there's someone on my street who knows God and who, when things fall apart for me, I can ask them to pray. And starting that walk of journeying alongside. You know, when Andrew Assel was leading our church, he had a really, really clear picture and a word about planting in the verges. And it was about us as a church operating in the small places, not the large parks and gardens where it all looks very fancy and where it's very big and very visible, but on the verges, on the edges, on those pieces of grass that aren't noticed, but that are everywhere. And I feel that the Lord is saying to us, will you be faithful in the small places, church? Will you be faithful in the small places? Will you let me change you? Will you let me teach you how to journey alongside and to listen and to love with my love so that people encounter Jesus? Sorry, I wasn't there with the Bible.
Yeah, I can come in now, because I sort of want to go. I fully agree with what Joe's saying about the small things, but I'm also excited about the big things as well. And I sort of think what you know, I mentioned that idea of like a before school club. Somebody else in our church family has in the past said to me, you know, why can't we do something for mums and babies, and just that there isn't NCT, which is
Quite middle class.
Yeah, quite middle and upper class, but actually just helps young mums. We've got a lot of young mums in Buxton to meet other young mums and to get the help that they need. And I think, yes, that would be great. And what I want to say to like each one of us is that what is exciting to me about this vision, there's lots of things that are exciting actually, but one of the things is that it's not a vision for what the church leaders are going to change about church to make it better for everybody. It's a vision for every single one of us in church, because we all have our part to play. And what I want to really say is, what is it that God has made you passionate about? What is your soapbox, if you like, that you know, when you see something going on, you want to stand up and you want to say something about it, because that is something from God that he's put inside you. And I believe that church should actually enable us, all of us, to actually really use what he's put inside us to see his kingdom come in this town, in this area. It's you know, a lot of it is about justice. When you look at what his kingdom coming looks like, you know, I was just looking at Matthew 25. We all know it so well, but I was thinking, what does it look like when his kingdom comes in this area? And it says very clearly, "For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me." That's what it looks like when we do these practical things to help others. That brings his kingdom into this town. It helps to make him known, because it's us who are doing it, and we are all mini Jesuses. We're all doing it because we've got him living inside us. So, you know, yeah, some of these things are going to be for after COVID. You know, I'm not going to talk about other ideas, because I actually want to hear your ideas on November the 4th for what you want to see happen in Buxton, how you want to see his kingdom come. And that's going to be a real opportunity for us to have a big discussion about it and to get excited about it. But just to sort of come back to what Joe was saying, now we can get involved in the small things. It's the little things that really can make a difference and have an impact on someone. So, you know, I mean, maybe, I don't know, this is half term. Maybe you know some families who are going to be struggling because their kids aren't getting fed at school this week. And I know there's 2 or 3 of the cafes in town that have said they're going to actually provide either meals or takeaway sandwiches or that sort of thing, which is absolutely great. And I think that is part of seeing God's kingdom come, and that, you know, God doesn't just work through Christians. He actually works through anyone and everyone he chooses, because he's God, to actually see what is on his heart come about. And I think getting hungry kids fed is on his heart. And so, you know, but maybe there's a family near you that you might be able to get alongside and just sort of say, oh, you know, I happen to by accident cook twice as much chili as I needed today. You know, would you like some? You know, it's something daft like that is what I'd do. But, you know, you can probably think of much better ways, of much more appropriate ways of helping.
I was also thinking about, I put a post up on Facebook about the cafes and that had offered to help. And when I was praying about it, I felt that the Lord was saying to me, you know, the people, they may not know me, but they are responding with a heart that is not out of line with my heart. And those, in a way, are opportunities for us to come alongside those people. So those businesses that are responding, they may not be run by Christians, but what if we got to know those people who are already responding in a manner in line with God's heart, and we built relationships there? Can you see the opportunity? Because they're already displaying some of his compassion, some of what his heart is, but they don't necessarily know Jesus. And I think in the times that we're in, the more that society comes out and helps people, the danger is that we get no difference between the fact that we are Christians and that good people do good things. And good moral people do good things all the time, and that's marvellous. But ours is to journey alongside so that they understand what has been put in them, where it's come from, and who it reflects, and lead them to the table. And that table is Jesus. Yeah, go on.
And so, yeah, I think you know Joe and I quite well by now. You know that we've got a heart for all of us in our family. We've got a heart for this town. You know that we had these crazy ideas when we moved down from Bath Road into the Source, that it was just a step on the way to Marks and Spencer's, and that I've got this crazy idea that we're going to be in there and our church is going to be in there. But it's sort of, we really have got a heart for seeing people and organizations working together to bring his kingdom. And what we term it as, when we sort of sit and just chat, have big chats about these sorts of things, is that we want to see what we're classing as a hope hub, or a hub of hope in this town, somewhere that actually a lot of different organizations are, but all with the same heart, all in effect bringing God's kingdom to this town. So whether that's people like Citizens Advice, whether it's Job Centre, whether it's the food bank, whether it's a sort of community cafe, whether it's Ark Housing, there's probably others as well, other organisations that are working. Whether we have a sort of internet cafe type thing to sorry, someone's just sent me a message to say it's not crazy. No, it's not crazy, and I believe it's God-given, Andy. Thank you. But somewhere that, and M&S would be absolutely ideal, and it's at the moment up for rent, having been purchased. They put these for rent boards up and nobody's taken them down yet, to my knowledge. So I'm actually, I think I'm going to ring them up and say, okay, just let me know what sort of figures they want, and this is the sort of thing that I'd like to use it for. Obviously this is post-COVID, but we are, I believe, going to get to a post-COVID world at some point. And when we get there, I think we need to be ready, which is why we're sort of launching this vision now, because it's about preparing our hearts, getting us ready, getting us on the right page to actually, when we get the opportunity and God brings it our way, we can then say, right, yes, we are ready to run. We are, we're on the starting line. We're just waiting for that starter's pistol, and we will then be off and running at full tilt into all that you have for this town, God.
So I think we very much believe in church as not being separated out from the community, and that if the church could be actually working alongside as part of that hub of hope. And some of those organisations, they won't be Christians, they might have Christians within them, but they may not. But they are people who've chosen to work for places that make a difference and that care. And there's such an opportunity there for us to network and to build relationships and to be seen as part of something that brings hope. Ruth is on the screen with us today. Her Christmas for the community is very much like that. People know it's out there, it helps everybody in the community. And yet a lot of people who know Ruth know that she's a Christian. And there's such an opportunity there that comes from that. And so our hearts are very much for that. And then I want to talk to you about what it would be like. What would Sunday church look like, or what would we look like as a people if this was coming into play? And so I want you to think about, John's shared some sort of quite out there big hub of hope things which we would love to work towards. And we know that this is already happening. I know of one in Alfreton. I know of another very large, well-organised one like this in Bath. And there's places where the Lord is already doing this, and where we can learn and go and visit and find out about those things. So that's like a very big picture thing. But then there's what I was talking about, being small and being faithful in the verges, and the one person that you pray for and you set an extra cutlery set for, and that you say to the Lord, who is it that you'd have me truly journey alongside? Not just with an agenda of getting them over a salvation line, but with truly bringing them to encounter you and listening and loving. And so there's a very small scale to this as well. And I believe that as we do that, that when we come to church on a Sunday or whatever day it is, come to church and gather on the glorious day when we get to actually finally be together again, it really will be. I believe we'll be coming, bringing stories of what we see God doing. and not just sort of coming because we're a bit like run down from a week, and then we're coming to consume our weekly portion of faith delivered from the front, and then, you know, go back and take it into the week. But what a difference if we're coming with our stories of what we're seeing the Lord has done, with the conversation we have with so-and-so that we just can't believe is possible, with an opening that's come up, that we will come sort of excited and overflowing and having testimonies and having things to pray for and people to pray for. What a different type of church it will feel like when we're coming, bringing things in, and then authentically encouraging each other's in those journeys alongside each other. I hope I'm being clear in that. Martin, a little while ago, on the week that we, sorry, I'm putting you on the spot, don't panic. On the week that I invited you to lay the cutlery on the table and pray about journeying alongside and who would have access. You know, Martin's a town chaplain, and he can probably share with you afterwards. He sent us an email, and it was so encouraging, because as he did that every day and he and Paula prayed, the Lord just did incredible things with the relationships in his town chaplaincy businesses, and people who have always been polite and friendly but have never asked for prayer and never pushed it beyond, suddenly started coming out of the woodwork asking for prayer and things. He can share it far better than me. And God is just waiting for us to be willing to start in our own hearts, to start in the small places. And when we're faithful in the small places, I believe that our church is uniquely called and positioned to be hope bringers, to have this hope hub, and to see what the Lord does. And what an opportunity that will be to bring so many people to encounter Jesus at his table.